And up here. No, I haven't opened any of these yet. That's interesting. All right, so up here is the thyroid cartilages, this big bump here, right, up here. And the bump on the front, right there, is the Adam's apple. Okay, so thyroid cartilage is right there. The cricoid would be the very first ring right beneath those. And then if you look at the trachea, you can see the little ribs there, right, the little cartilage. And if you put your finger in the back here, you'll feel that they're all open in the back. Okay, they don't go all the way around. Lying right behind the trachea is this very flexible esophagus, and that has to be flexible because when you swallow, you got a big bolus of food going down there. Okay, so this is the esophagus. Okay, coming down a little further. I don't know how much of this is actually thymus gland and how much is fat in this one. I suspect most of this is fat. But if this had a thymus gland, it would be right here. It's like really dark red glandular tissue right here. But as you age, your thymus gland gets reabsorbed because you don't use it anymore in us and in cats. So this is an older cat. If we had really young cats, you would see this nice reddish color gland right there. Okay, so that would be the thymus. These are, oops. These are lungs, right, up against the back body wall. This is the heart in the middle. And this thin but very tough muscle right here is the diaphragm. Okay? The diaphragm separates the chest from the abdomen, and you have to keep this as a closed airtight cavity because you have to be able to change pressure. So when you breathe in, right, you breathe in, your ribs come up and out, your diaphragm contracts and is pulled down. So what you've done is you've increased volume in your chest, which means you decrease pressure. For your physics, they're inversely related. So you increase volume, you decrease pressure inside, so air is going to want to come in. When you exhale, ribs go down, diaphragm snaps back up, so now you've decreased volume, which means you've increased pressure inside, so air wants to go out. So if I were to put a hole right here, I wouldn't hit anything vital, but I would open up that cavity. It would no longer be a sealed cavity, and you would suffocate because you would not be able to change pressure. You've got to stuff something in the hole. Okay? Having said that, clearly if this diaphragm is moving up and down, there has to be some nerve connection to it to get it to move. And there are two very long nerves that come all the way down alongside the heart. Here it is right here on this side. See this? This thread right here coming down, right into the diaphragm. Those are the big phrenic nerves. There's one on each side. Okay, well maybe not in this cat. There's one on each side, come right down on each side to innervate the diaphragm. A friend of mine actually had surgery and the surgeon nicked one of those, so half of her diaphragm is paralyzed. So she gets out of breath very easily.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that really sucked. Okay, you can see this white line right here in the diaphragm? Right there? That's called the central tendon of the diaphragm. It's just where the nerve fibers end, so there's no nerve fibers there, and that gives it that white appearance. I don't know why that's important, but now you know. So having said that this diaphragm has to seal off the chest from the abdomen, we do have a little bit of a problem here because our stomach is here, our esophagus is here. Clearly the esophagus has to go to the stomach, which means it has to go through the diaphragm. That point where that esophagus, that white right there, that's the esophagus, where that comes through the diaphragm is called the hiatus. Sometimes, and I worked at women and infants for years, and we saw this all the time in preemies, that opening can tear because it's so fragile. And then you have abdominal contents moving up into the chest. That's called a hiatal hernia, and they have to go in and sew that up. Okay? So where that esophagus meets the stomach, this is the fundus of the stomach, this very top portion up here. Right where those two come together, there is a sphincter. A sphincter is a purse string of muscle. So when the food comes into the stomach, that thing has to close to keep everything in the stomach. Because in your stomach, you have two types of cells. You have cells that produce mucus, and you have cells that produce hydrochloric acid. The mucus puts down a really thick layer all on the inside of the stomach, which protects the actual stomach wall. And then you have the acid in there. Okay? So if that sphincter doesn't work and some of that acid washes back up onto the end of the esophagus doesn't have that mucus protection. So it actually starts to burn and irritate and can erode the holes in the end of the esophagus. That's reflux disease. Okay? So once the food comes in here, it's mixed with the acid, it's broken down into like a slurry that's called a chyme with a pH of about 2. Okay? So we know from the stomach that stuff has to go into the small intestines, which is next in line, right?
Oh my God.
So here is This is all intestines here, obviously, right? This curlicue stuff. So here's our stomach, this kind of J-shaped stomach. This is the body of the stomach right here, and then this little piece down here is called the pyloric region of the stomach. And then about the first 4 inches of small intestine, the stuff that's not too curlied right here, about the first 4 inches, this is called the duodenum. Okay? So now we have another problem. The small intestines also has no mucus protection. So this stuff has a pH of 2. So what we have to do is regulate flow from the stomach into the small intestines, and we have to neutralize that acid. That's the job of the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. So if we come up here, this big organ that's attached, actually physically attached to the bottom of the diaphragm, this is liver. And this attachment here, this is called the falciform ligament, and that the function is to hold the liver up in place. Okay? So here's our liver. If we pull some of the lobes apart here a little bit, has it really been pulled apart here quite a bit? We see this sac in here.
Is that your gallbladder?
That's the gallbladder. That sac right there. See it? See that? Okay, that's the gallbladder. So the liver produces salts called bile salts in a solution, and it stores them in the gallbladder. And then it releases them from the gallbladder through this duct coming out here called the cystic duct. Okay? You also have secretions coming in from the liver, and you see a whole bunch of, a little hard to see in this guy, I can't hold them right here. See these little tubes coming in here? There's these little ducts coming in from other parts of the liver. Those are hepatic ducts. Those combined with the cystic duct to form one big tube, which is the common bile duct. If we can pick up on that under all this crud. Which is right somewhere in here. It's down here. Which is right here anyway. It's a big tube that comes in right at the very beginning of the small intestines. So you have the bile coming in from the gallbladder, you have secretions coming in from the liver, which are primarily digestive enzymes, coming in here, and also on the backside, which you can't see, you also have a duct, the pancreatic duct, coming in from the pancreas, which also brings a lot of digestive enzymes. Okay, and all of that stuff is delivered in a very alkaline solution, a very basic solution. Okay, so what happens is, on the pyloric end of the stomach, where it meets the small intestines, there's another sphincter, because we can't have all of that acid stuff rushing in all at once. So that sphincter releases just a little spurt at a time of this pH 2 chime. And as soon as that stuff is released, it's neutralized by the secretions coming in through the common bile duct. Okay, so we've killed 2 birds with 1 stone, right? We've got it coming in, we've delivered all of our digestive enzymes, and we've neutralized it. Okay? So then it goes through this first 4 inches of small intestines here called the duodenum, and by the time it gets to the end of that little section of small intestines, all chemical digestion is complete. Okay, it's broken down as much as we can break it down. Okay? Then all of the rest of this goo here, all of the rest of this intestines is for absorbing all those nutrients. Okay? So the first 4 inches are called the duodenum, all this real curly stuff is jejunum, and about the last 3 or 4 inches, last little U-shaped piece, is called the ileum. Okay, so it's duodenum, jejunum, ileum. And the ileum attaches to the large intestines, which is this right here. This is much larger in diameter. There's less of it, but it's very broad. Okay? So where that small intestines connects to the large intestines, if you feel here, there's a little bump. That's actually a valve. That's called the ileocecal valve that regulates flow from the small to the large intestines. Okay? And you also have this little sac right here hanging off out of nowhere. That's the cecum. If this were humans, this is where our appendix would be hanging down. The cats don't have an appendix, they have a cecum. And if we can put this back in somewhat of the right orientation, like so, okay, you would have an ascending colon, a transverse colon, and then the descending colon. Okay? And that descending colon is actually held in place up against the back body wall by this membrane right here called the mesocolon. Because we need to keep that nice and straight, because as the waste gets compacted and comes down here, if that kinks up, that's no good. Okay, so then from the descending colon, it goes down to the rectum where it's stored and compact, and then finally elimination through the anus. Okay? Now if we come back up here, we talked about pancreas. We can find the pancreas.
What is that?
We'll get to that in a second. Just get it out of the way for now. This thing right here, this isn't a digestive organ. This thing that looks like beef teriyaki. This is actually the spleen. Wait until it dries out.
So we're
It
not
really does
eating
look like
beef
teriyaki.
teriyaki or
I'm
chicken anymore.
I'm not eating Chinese chicken or beef teriyaki ever again.
Okay, so this is the spleen, but the pancreas runs from the spleen. This is all pancreas tissue right here. From the spleen down under the stomach and over onto the duodenum. All of this stuff here is pancreas. Okay? What else do we need to know? Oh, you should look at this mesentery here. You look at the mesentery.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Isn't that pretty? These are all of the blood vessels, right? All absorbing all those nutrients. It's all carried back to the liver where it's filtered and then out to the body. Okay?
That's one of our next labs,
That's,
right?
yeah, when we do blood vessels. This gooey stuff here that I've been pulling out of the way all the whole time, this is called omentum. It's kind of like a fatty apron that covers everything. A little bit of protection and insulation there. Okay, this part is called the greater omentum because it's actually attached to the larger curve of the stomach. Okay, there's also the lesser omentum, which is this little bit of stuff in here that's left, and that's on the smaller curve of the stomach, the inside curve. Okay, so this is lesser omentum, this is greater omentum. And if the stomach were open, which yours is not, you would see on the inside, you see all these extra folds of tissue. Those are called the rugae, and that provides extra tissue for expansion. When you eat, your stomach has to expand, right? Those are the rugae. I think we just need to let's see how your glands are on this guy. The salivary glands, so far we haven't had very much luck with them. Let me see what we got going here. That's what's left of your carotid duct. Okay. 3 sets of glands. You find the ear, right below the ear, this right here, all this gooey stuff right here, it's kind of gushy. That's the parotid gland. That's the largest of the salivary glands. Okay? And this right here is the parotid duct, which this is the masseter muscle. It runs right across the masseter muscle, right up into the mouth. Okay, so parotid gland, parotid duct. This right here is the submandibular. It's right under the mandible. There's also you can't see it on this guy too well. There's also a duct that goes into the mouth there. And then deep in here someplace is the sublingual. It's a tiny little gland. It's deep to the submandibular. You're not going to see that one. Okay? But they will ask you parotid. They'll ask you a duct if we still have one intact by then, and the submandibular.
Will they ask us the duct for the submandibular?
Not
usually.
Not usually, because we usually don't have a good duct left. If you do have it, I mean, it's very obvious. You know, it's just a tube coming right off of there. It goes right up into the mouth. Okay? All right, so now we just need to do the pluck.